So hi everyone, and welcome to this, our last session of the 2020 LIXI Forum. Whilst it's obviously been different to previous years, the feedback's been really positive so far. And I think we've managed to bring some interesting presentations across a variety of topics. So I'm here today with Stephen Moore, the Chair of LIXI and CEO of Choice Aggregation Services. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Shane.
I guess firstly, would you like to introduce yourself and the organisations that you represent on the LIXI board?
Sure, I think you've probably given part of the story now. So yeah, Stephen Moore, I'm CEO of Choice Aggregation, have been for the last 10 years. For those that don't know, Choice is wholly owned by NAB. So I also represent NAB on LIXI as well. Now that said, for those who look at the financial press, we just announced the sale of Choice to Loan Market Group, which is very exciting times for us as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. So one of the things a lot of people don't realise about LIXI and the directors that we've got is that all of the directors do so on an unpaid basis. Now, I think we've got a really strong board, and it's populated with highly esteemed industry veterans, such as yourself, and you've now been chair for 3 years. What is it about LIXI that makes it worthwhile you spending your time offering that up to be on the LIXI board?
Yeah, it's a good question, Shane. I mean, you're right. Look, we all do this for love, and we're very conscious that this is in fact a member-based organisation. Set up for the benefit of members. So, that's important. It's a representative board, and our responsibilities therefore are for the greater good of the industry. Veteran, gee, I guess some of the fellow directors are old like I am, I guess, but from my point of view, what do I do? I mean, I understand the criticality of data and efficient data transfer across the industry, and we have a very connected industry, especially on the lending side. We know that data standards are critical for efficient data transfer, and this is the ever important role that LIXI plays. And if you look into the future, it's hard to see a future where we don't have even more data that's moving across the industry. So that's sort of, the key reason. The other is, I think it doesn't matter what you do, when you're a leader in, whatever your chosen field is, I think you also have a broader responsibility to the industry you're part of, and that is to contribute. And that's how I think about it. And I know that's how many of my fellow directors think about it as well. In fact, we're all very, very lucky to have some fantastic people on the board that, as I mentioned, we're all there, to benefit the industry.
Yeah. So in my opening presentation this week, I spoke a bit about the risk that I think lenders might be building some digital veneers rather than truly building the digital mortgage, in that they introduce some digital features, but don't fix the legacy processes and systems under the hood that make it really hard for them to execute change. And we're all executing change all the time at the moment. What do you see as the reality?
Yeah, and look, it's a great, I saw your presentation, Shane. It's a fantastic presentation, so well done on that, by the way. It's certainly very topical. Digital mortgage, I think, the start for me is how in fact you define a digital mortgage. Mm. If you said that a digital mortgage is one where you have no human involvement whatsoever, I think there's very limited demand for it. In fact, I'm not sure it exists. But if you said that digital mortgage is about digitizing all of the relevant components, but ensuring there's a human element to it. Now, as we've seen over the last 6-8 months now, we've effectively been operating with many of the components of digital. What we're doing now, as an example, is example of a digital format. So, to that extent, I think the industry, the good news, the industry has really accelerated progress this year when it comes to digital. And there's components of that around digital data capture. There's components on digital ID, digital signature. in fact, all documents across the process. But I certainly share your insight that, you know, for many lenders, whilst there is progress on elements of digitising the mortgage, there's still significant inefficiency in core systems. And, you know, we know that to realise the true gains when it comes to efficiency of data transfer, you need full end-to-end. And, you know, I know the classic niggle, and I think it's the pet hate for all of us, you know, that is, you know, you go to an organisation who knows you, they have all the data they've collected on you, and, you know, and variations of the prime example where, you know, you get treated like a new customer again. It is an absolute pet hate. So I think for many organisations, there's a fair way to go, Shane. But I know you're interviewing me, but I might throw back to you as well, because I know you've got some views on this too.
Yeah, and I see it talking to our members and licensees, the difficulties they have, and it comes back to that point of being able to execute change, because day in, day out, all the requirements around what we do and how we do it are changing. And if the one thing you're not really great at is executing change reliably, even if it's small incremental change, it really makes it hard to introduce those new digital features. So it doesn't matter what that feature is, a simple e-signing or digital ID, if you can't execute simple change, it makes it hard to implement those.
Yeah, and you know that's certainly one of the benefits of LIXI, isn't it? You know, not just from a data standard perspective, but also tools that can help with development and streamline development processes.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So so clearly there's been a lot going on. We mentioned requirements. So the Royal Commission, responsible lending, open banking now, best interest duty, banking code of conduct. And we heard from Elise, Ivory and John Denathan earlier in the week. Do you have any insights into how you think the industry will respond to all of these regulatory changes? Because there'll be more coming up in the new year.
Yeah, gee, I've been reflecting on this recently. You know, if you asked me a couple of years ago what I was going to be focused on in the coming period, and someone told me that it would be, you know, data and regulation, you know, I'd shake my head. Yet it's exactly what I'm focused on. I think a number of us are at the moment. And, you know, if you look back over the last period, you know, reg change has been the absolute constant for us. And I know it keeps teams busy, you know, that's for sure. But I do think as an industry, you know, we are doing, you know, quite an extraordinary job, you know, digesting significant change, albeit coming at a significant cost as well. Look, I might, you know, I guess there's a lot in that question. I might just address a few components, if I could, just on where we're at as an industry. So, so responsible lending is probably a good place to start, you know, for many on the call. So, you know, there is a proposal, and I stress it is proposal stage, to remove responsible lending. And, you know, what we don't know is how that will play out yet, of course. Now, just for the record, I don't have any problem with responsible lending per se. I think the issue has been, you know, how it's been interpreted by some, and, you know, that creates additional process, etc. Now that said, with the assumption that responsible lending, you know, does in fact disappear, you know, certain obligations on all of us don't. And as an example, you know, APRA responsibilities include reasonable inquiry when it comes to individual circumstances. You know, that's not going to disappear. I am hopeful we're going to see streamlining of process, but, you know, consistency in data is going to be just as critical. And, you know, very topical one, of course, is ensuring, you know, use of standardised expense categories. You know, we know it's important. What else? I might just touch on open banking as well. I get on a bit of a roll with regulation, as you probably know, Shane, but I might touch on open banking. I know there's a really good session on that as well. You know, my perspective on open banking is a few things. So, you know, one is that it's a slow burn. You know, this is not going to be, we're live now in part, and we're not going to see this miraculous, transformation overnight. We know that. However, I do see it as really important to driving competition for lending. I share that view, and I know certainly, government does as well. Having greater transparency, ownership of customers of their own data first and foremost, and transparency with the ability to share that with others will be a real driver of competition for lending. So I think there's lots of upside. What's important though, as part of that, and again with the appropriate controls in place, we haven't quite got the access right for trusted advisors and others, including brokers. And I say that because, partly for invested interest, that's the space I work in, of course, but also we know that brokers are a key driver of competition for lending in Australia. And to realise the benefits of open banking, we need reasonable, relatively seamless access to customer data with their permission, and ideally the insights on that data to realise those benefits. So that's where we need to do a bit more work, I reckon. I'll just do one more, maybe on best interest duty. Again, another very topical one for us as well. And we're busily right across the industry getting our heads around this. 1 January start, so it's coming up very quickly. That's an area I think we've got fantastic progress as an industry as well. I do think it's always tricky to say this when you're in the middle of change, but I do think that would be the best thing that could happen to the broker market. And when I say this to many of our brokers, they give me a look, because when you're involved in changing processes, and let's face it, there is more effort required. But the reason why I'm so positive about it is because no one else across the value chain will have a legislative obligation to act in the customer's best interest other than brokers. And not only is that a great outcome for customers, it's a good outcome for the industry too, because that regulatory obligation and therefore trust will drive more customers to see brokers. And the reason why I mention open banking and best interest in conjunction, I think they're very related to drive good outcomes for customers.
Yeah.
Long answer, mate, but I get pretty pumped up with all the changes.
Yeah, I guess it's reflected in the market share results we just saw announced with brokers hitting over 60%. I think that's the first time ever at that level.
Yeah, 60%. We're still predicting, in the next 3 years, broker share of market will get to 70% plus, and on the back of best interest duty primarily.
And you think that's a driver for it, because of the perception that the broker is acting in the best interest of the customer. It's attractive. Well,
absolutely. Said no one. You can't see anyone else who will have that same obligation that brokers do.
Yeah.
How do you know you're getting the right or the best outcome for you? Well, you have to see a broker.
Yeah. Back to the consumer data, right then, open banking.
Yeah.
Obviously, at this stage, we're only in a read access environment. And LIXI obviously has been around for 20 years working with origination. So in essence, the right access component of it. It was interesting hearing Mark from the open banking group talking about trying to benefit from standards and organisations like LIXI that have been around for a long time, because if they were to have to redevelop all of the data models that we've done, it's a really large amount of effort. What are your thoughts on that kind of collaboration and where LIXI ends up being positioned going forward?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is probably obvious to this, Shane, but I think there's a significant opportunity to work hand in hand with open banking standards, and I think Mark sort of summed it up well in his presentation. It doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel, and it certainly doesn't. We've come, as we've come a hell of a long way in LIXI, learning around data standards. LIXI 1 to LIXI 2 is a great example of a leapfrog in progress. So I think it makes complete sense. Look, there's still a bit of work to go through, but it's hard to imagine why you'd have open banking standards on one hand that don't then relate to LIXI data standards, which is about the flow of transfer of data. To me, they fit very cleanly together.
Yeah.
So more work to go on that, but I think there's really that should be really exciting. In fact, as always, we're only here to benefit the industry, and I think there is real upside for the industry having the standards aligned.
Yeah. Now, reflecting back, so LIXI, we're 20 years old this year. We've been around for a while, and you've been on the board now for almost 4 years. What do you think the biggest changes that you've seen within LIXI that someone outside looking in mightn't necessarily notice?
Wouldn't notice. So, and maybe good to hear from others on what they have noticed over the last period. So maybe if there's any questions on that or comments on that, that would be fantastic. I think the first thing is probably that LIXI appears far greater than it is. LIXI, for those that don't know, LIXI is a small, focused and highly productive team. There is only 6 people in LIXI, Shane, Louise, John, Aman, Alariza and Samar, that's it. There's only 6 people in LIXI, but, if you talk to any member on, in point in time, the value that the team provides, they would swear there's a whole team of people just looking after them. So, that's sort of the first key point. The second, I think I probably touched on this earlier, that LIXI is more than just standards, and I know this is a big focus and will continue. It's the tools that then help you with greater efficiency when you're developing or changing systems, and that's really important. I think it's going to be increasingly important over time for members as well. The good news is I think LIXI is becoming less hidden. That's what we've seen. Certainly, my observation over the last 2 years. I started as what's LIXI again? Now, I think now there's sort of general awareness. I don't think there's the depth of awareness in some areas, but certainly general awareness of the value of LIXI. So that's some good news. The final point I might make on this, Shane, is there's far more to go. For those that don't know, and again, this is early work. There's certainly more to go in this space, but there's now interest from a number of international markets around the standards that LIXI have worked on. So again, similar to the CDR recognition, you've got standards that have worked and been tuned over time, and adoption is strong. Why would you reinvent the wheel when something works? So that's pretty exciting as well, I think, Shane.
Yeah. And that's just come in as a question, actually. Someone's asked, have we thought about expanding to other countries?
Well, the answer is yes, but obviously there's more work to go on that, and in response to that question more broadly, so we've got a separate strategy session with the board to discuss this very point. Yeah. So I'm going to state the obvious that you can see the potential, but what we want to ensure is that the service and support we're providing to Australian members will not be compromised in anything we do. In fact, we want to make sure whatever we do would be enhanced. And, you can certainly see some upside having a more international or global standard. That's for sure, especially as we see, larger international tech companies move into Australia as well. But we just need to be, cautious in our approach.
Yeah. So if we go back to sort of the broker channel, what do you see as the biggest pain point that LIXI might play a role in the year going forward?
Yeah, look, actually probably the biggest pain point for broker market at the moment is, I touched on this, the transition to best interest duty, for all the right reasons, but any significant change in process, it takes a while to digest. But I think the key role that LIXI can play in the broker market is, at its very core, and that is ensuring, broad adoption of standards. And, the reason why I say that, As a broker, you deal with multiple lenders, and but equally, when you're a broker, and as we move into a best interest environment, more is expected of you. When more is expected, that comes at a cost, and therefore business efficiency becomes everything. Now, each time there's a different variation in process, lender A to B, etc. I'll use one of our topics around expenses. This lender likes it that way, another lender a different way. These requirements, and on the list of variation goes. It's the hidden cost of complexity that, as an individual lender, you may or may not appreciate, but you certainly see the result of it. If your process is different than these other 4 lenders, the hidden cost of this comes down to then conversion rates and rework, etc. And so I think the core role of LIXI is fundamental for brokers, now, and I said even more so as we move into a more complex environment.
Yeah.
Look, I might just one more thing on that, Shane, and I think I've said this before, but with a question with many players in the market to differentiate, and that is absolutely the right approach. It's often misinterpreted, where you differentiate, and I use the term that standardization and differentiation in fact go hand in hand, and which sounds like a contradiction on face value, but where I'm going with that is the more you standardize the inputs, standard process data in same standard, consistent throughout process, etc. You then differentiate on what you then do with that data, what you then do with the insights, and how you develop it, etc. That's critical. If you focus on the differentiation only, and you think it's smarter to not have standardized approach to process and data transfer, then you're going to trip yourself up. So I think that's important, not just for brokers, but all players across the market.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to the living expenses, which is one that's obviously taken a fair bit of effort from LIXI's perspective over the last couple of years. It was back in February that we published the latest update to the different categories of living expenses. The adoption has not been consistent across the industry. Obviously, you hear that as a problem from brokers, that inconsistency does cause them pain.
Yeah, it does, and I guess what I'd say, it's similar to what I said. It's you accept when you get whatever data you get as a lender, you'll do whatever you want with it, and that's clear. But if the inputs are standardized, in other words, the standard categories are used, and then you choose to do something else, break them down further into subcategories when you receive the data, consolidate them in a different way, etc. I mean, that doesn't matter. The value is having the standard transfer to get to you in the first place. So, my encouragement for all, and I think we've made some significant progress, Shane. But you're right. Is it perfection yet? No, it's not. But equally, it would be naive of us to think that we agree on some standards and everyone just magically updates their systems. Yeah. The key message from me is really that when you're updating your systems, that's then the time to be looking at if you haven't already adopting LIXI 2, but then looking at the expense categories. Great example. That's the time to do it.
And is there anything in the latest changes to the regulations, responsible lending, etc., that you would think would change the way that those categories would be collected, or does that stay the same?
Look, I think so. I mean, and I mentioned before that what won't go away is an APRA requirement for reasonable inquiry, around customer circumstances, and that's about income expenses and more broadly, of course, those same standards that apply to APRA regulated lenders will also then apply for all other lenders that will be then regulated through managed through ASIC. So where I'm going with that is, with the need for reasonable inquiry, I can't see the need to have an understanding of expenses go away. I mean, in fact, quite the opposite. So, with that in mind, and by the way, use of benchmarks is certainly acceptable as well. But, I think it's just a classic example of, yes, we need to do it. We know it's a pain point for everyone across the market at the moment. Let's make that as seamless as possible.
Yep.
The way to make it as seamless as possible is to standardise the inputs.
Yep. Excellent. All right, we have had another question. I think we've already covered that. Is LIXI being used as part of open banking? So at this stage, no, but I guess it sounds like watch this space. There's collaboration afoot. All right, I think we're getting close to the end of time. Stephen, is there any last minute things you'd like to add in the minute or two we've got left?
Look, Dan, the other thing I'd say, and this will embarrass you, of course, Shane, because I know how modest you are. I just want to say thanks to you and the team. I think it's been tricky for all of us in business generally to how we adapt to a different way of working, and this is a great example. We would have done the forum face to face, and I know you had a lot of dilemmas on how we do this, and I think my guidance was don't try and replicate what you do in a full day online, because people's appetite to look at a screen continually is low. Early feedback I've heard from how this has been run in some short and sharp sessions has been really positive. So really just a well done to you and the team on how you pulled this together.
Well, thank you, and likewise thanks to you and the rest of the board in particular for all of the time that you commit to LIXI and for the benefit of the industry as a whole.
And thank you all those for dialing in as well.
Thank you everyone, and have a good day.
Okay, thanks folks.
Yes. Bye.